Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Supergirl fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Supergirl in the New 52 and Rebirth eras is returning guest, Adam Daltorio. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me back.
My pleasure. So here's the funny thing. When I originally mapped out this Supergirl event, I did not include the New 52 and Rebirth eras. Both of these had been a big gap for me, and I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't really feel a great pull towards covering them, but a few things changed that. Number one is that if I don't do it now, when am I ever going to do it? And I didn't want to leave anything on the table as we were making our way through our Supergirl coverage. So I figured, okay, for the sake of completeness, let's do this and let's do it now. Also, I did have at least a couple of people who requested it because I put out this graphic on social media with the list of everything we were planning to cover. And I was so pleased with myself. I'm like, all right, well, look how thorough this is. And there were a couple of people. What about New 52? What about Rebirth? And here's the thing. I'm an easy mark when it comes to that. If I hear a couple of people asking for something, I'm like, oh, okay, like there's demand for this. Let's do it. But I think far and away, the biggest reason why we are here now talking about the New 52 and Rebirth eras for this character is because of this reimagining of Zor-El as, spoiler alert, Cyborg Superman. Big twist.
Big twist.
Right? And for me, it's notable, I think, for two main reasons. One, as we've been going through all of this Supergirl material, certain themes and patterns have emerged. And one of them, fair to say, has been the survival and reappearance of Zor-El or Zor-El and Alora. We've seen this multiple times now, going all the way back to the Silver Age. Turned out they survived the destruction of Argo.
In the survival zone.
In the survival zone, exactly. And then post-Infinite Crisis in the new Krypton saga, we find out that both of them are alive. They had been assimilated by Brainiac into the bottle city of Kandor. They played critical roles in the new Krypton saga. Zor-El's assassination there was a major turning point. We had Alora as a leader for a good part of that story. In other media as well, the Supergirl television show, we find out at a certain point that Alora and Argo had survived. That was when they recast the character with Erica Durance. In the final season, we find out Zor-El is still alive in the Phantom Zone. So this is very much a thing as far as one or both of her parents still being out there in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a kind of an interesting thing because it's obviously when people talk about differences between Superman and Supergirl, the big one is always Supergirl survived on Krypton. And they kind of forget that. That's kind of like a more relevant to the now sort of thing. Is this actively affects her life, is that her parents are still alive at given whatever time it is, you know?
Yeah, man, 100%. And then, of course, the other big thing for me, and the audience knows this because I'm always talking about how formative the death and return of Superman was, but anytime we're talking about any of our Reign of the Superman characters, my ears perk up. And obviously, we're not in Hank Henshaw territory here, but rather we have Zor-El taking on the mantle of Cyborg Superman. And I got some thoughts on this. I'm a little bit mixed, but I'm excited to talk it through with you and all of that. And so we'll get to the Zor-El piece, but let me just ask you, just to kind of kick us off here, what has your experience been with the New 52 era of Supergirl in particular? Like, were you reading this as it came out? Did you come to it later? What's your experience?
As this came out, I do remember just flipping through it and kind of being like, I don't know, looks kind of normal. The suit looks crazy. And I kind of ignored it for a while. I kind of had my ear to the ground about it. Then, I think last year, I decided to totally delve in and try to read all of Zor-El stories since the movie was coming out. And I really felt like, oh, maybe I didn't give this a fair shake. And I found a lot more to appreciate about it. So I'm glad I revisited it, and I have a good bit of affection for it now.
On that note, I overall quite enjoyed the New 52 Supergirl, and I only planned, this is the thing, man, I only planned to read the first arc, the 0 issue, and then the few issues featuring Zor-El as Cyborg Superman. I figured, all right, we'll do a little bonus episode. It'll be a light lift as far as homework. I'm not going to go crazy. And I got to tell you, man, I ended up reading virtually the entire 40-issue series.
Woo! Phew! I'm glad I don't have to argue with you about it.
No, I really like
is it Michael Green is the first writer?
Michaels, Johnson, and Green, as we refer to them. We have the two of them.
Johnson and Green. I like the first like 3 arcs, and then it gets a little weird. But yeah, I think that they did a really good job of kind of doing a lot of stuff that, and this is going to be a reoccurring thing. I think between New 52 and Steve Orlando's Rebirth, there's kind of a lot of stuff that I feel like Woman of Tomorrow got credit for. You know, it kind of got credit for being the kind of first prestigious Supergirl book, kind of the first Supergirl book that people felt like wasn't like house style. And of course, thinking that it's the first Supergirl book to kind of be a little darker and a little bit more taking Krypton a little bit more seriously as a trauma. And I think that the stories we're going to talk about today kind of really are the first ones to really exaggerate that stuff. You know what I mean?
I mean, I do. And that's the funny thing, because for any folks who really took issue with Tom King's take on the character in Woman of Tomorrow and how she was quote unquote darker or angrier, it's like, I don't know. You look at the beginning of the New 52 series, and there's a reason for why she is the way she is. And I think the book does a good job of accounting for that, but they did not feel worlds apart. I mean, I think this is another theme in these episodes that we've been doing where, to your point, yeah, I do feel like Woman of Tomorrow has been held up by fans and critics alike as this outlier. And I keep coming back to this idea of like, I don't think it's as different as people seem to want to make it.
Right.
So just to give some context for this 40-issue series here. So the first year of the book is co-written by Michaels, Johnson, and Green. And in this first year of the book, we have just kind of the broad strokes here. We have Kara's pod landing in Siberia. She's attacked by the agents of this character, Simon Tycho. She clashes with Kal-El. She doesn't quite believe that he's the baby she knew from the planet Krypton. She makes her first friend in Siobhan, a.k.a. Silver Banshee, and that will continue to play out. She follows the Sunstone Crystal to the remains of Argo City. She meets Rain, the World Killer, and at the culmination of the first arc, takes on a quartet of those World Killers. Now, quick side note here. When I was watching the Supergirl TV series, when that show premiered in particular, that was kind of at the height of me not being plugged into the comic book side of things. Because again, comic book wise, we were in the New 52 territory. I really had kind of checked out. My local comic shop had closed by that point. Like I was just not dialed in with what was going on. So I was watching the Supergirl TV series, but I wasn't, and I wasn't podcasting about Superman. And so I wasn't really looking for those connection points the way that I would be now. And so obviously the third season of the Supergirl series made Rain their season-long baddie. And I really had no comic book basis for that character when I encountered her on the screen. And so it was very eye-opening to now be going through these New 52 issues and seeing Rain.
I did not know that was the same character.
There you go. Yeah.
I think I dropped off of the show pretty quickly.
I understand.
Yeah.
We'll have more to say on the Supergirl TV series, but I do get it. And I have my own kind of reservations when it comes to that. And then as that first year continues to unfold, we have more business with Silver Banshee and her father and her brother. We have the formation of Kara's own fortress, the Sanctuary under the ocean. And in that Zero issue, we get a great flashback to Kara's last days on Krypton. So I would say that's kind of the first phase of this series, those issues co-written by Michaels, Johnson, and Green. And then sort of the next iteration is Mike Johnson writing solo, and a good chunk of those issues tie into the Hell on Earth crossover, where we have this character who claims to be a Kryptonian. I think ultimately we find out he's a clone, right? That's the deal with Hell. Long term.
I don't remember. I didn't read that part.
That's fine.
It's a clone that Zor-El made. Is that true?
Something to that effect, but he wants to go back in time and save Krypton. And I will say, I read the Supergirl issues that tied into it, but I did not read the full crossover. So it was definitely a very disjointed reading experience.
Well, I remember that. Yeah, I did that as well. And I browsed through it. The notable thing is that she was sort of romantic with Hell.
Yes. Yeah.
So that comes back. There's a lot of, like you said, when they earn her kind of rage, it's not even that Krypton's gone. It's that people keep lying to her and manipulating her, and that's a big part of that arc. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the humans don't trust her. They attack her. There are people like hell, like Cyborg Superman, who try to convince her that Krypton can be saved, and they end up being up to no good. And so all of that really kind of piles up. And then I would say the third phase of this, we have a handful of issues basically written by Michael Allen Nelson, and that gets us into our Zor-El as Cyborg Superman territory, which we'll circle back to. The next major stretch is a decent-sized run, relatively speaking, by writer Tony Bedard, and the main thrust of this is that Red Daughter of Krypton arc, where Kara becomes a Red Lantern. This was a skim for me, not a skip, but a skim, because this too tied into a larger crossover type event, but I just kind of wanted to get a gist for it. And I know that her tenure as a Red Lantern is something that seems to stand out to people from this time. Mm-hmm. And then the final arc, we have Mike Johnson back now co-writing with Kay Perkins, and a really fascinating, relatively short arc to close out the series here, Crucible, where she becomes part of this intergalactic academy to learn how to be a guardian of her planet. And I found that to be a very intriguing premise and a cool hook that I wish had gotten to play out longer. So
yes,
I think the beginning and the end of this series actually were the highlights for me overall.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I definitely like I think it started stronger, but yes, Cyborg Superman's a highlight for me. I know a lot of people do really like the Red Lantern arc, and I wasn't really, when I reread it last year, I wasn't really getting it. But yeah, I think that there's not really there's nothing bad. I think that anyone who thinks that this run is bad and they just have this idea that it's all about anger and really edgy. And I think something you said that stuck with me is like they account for it. I think they really earn it more than a lot of New 52 stuff.
Yeah, I'm 100%. Real quick, I do want to say, while I was focusing on our writers across the 40 issues here, I did want to specifically single out our initial artist on the series. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but Mahmud Asrar. But beautiful art, especially early on in the series. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. That's a decent number of creative teams for only 40 issues. However, in looking at it all together, I think for the most part it holds together as a relatively consistent run. And look, I can't pass much judgment one way or the other on that Red Daughter arc because I only skimmed it. But from what I did see and what I've heard about it, I mean, I think you understand why Kara gets to that rage-filled point based on everything that's happened up until that point. And then by the end of the arc, she has rejected that and is ready to enter the next phase. And that's what we see in that Crucible arc. So yeah, I think despite the variety of creative teams over this 40 issue series, I think overall you get a pretty solid arc for the character.
They all seemed interested in picking up what the other person was doing and kind of rhyming with it. Yeah, and it all compounds too in a nice way.
Yes, and I want to circle back to this idea of just kind of accounting for this iteration of the character, because I think the biggest compliment I can pay, especially in that initial arc that introduces the new 52 version of Supergirl, is that it really leans into this strange visitor, stranger in a strange land idea. And I think does a very effective job of capturing her disorientation and confusion when that pod arrives. This is not the Silver Age where she and her parents were watching movies of Superman on Earth and then she knew where she was going. But rather she just arrives and is instantly attacked. And I really, really liked that the book leaned into the language barrier. Like she doesn't learn how to speak English until the Hell on Earth arc, where he sort of unlocks the language for her. And initially, it's only Siobhan who, through her magical language abilities, is able to communicate with her. And I thought that was a very, very real and effective choice.
Yeah. I actually wish they kept it with it longer. I actually do remember, as it was coming out, that was the thing that's like, oh, that doesn't look that good. But that language idea is a good idea. And they even... is to jump ahead. They even kind of expand on it in Rebirth, where they mention she has an accent.
Yes.
A thick accent. And it's just something that, I'd never really thought about. But it's like, yeah, of course she does. So, yeah, I actually wish that they stuck with the language thing longer And that when she does speak English, maybe it wasn't a full magic flip where she can do it entirely. But yeah, really, really cool idea for 6 or 7 issues at least. It's a good advantage of it.
Yeah, it's funny because as I was reading it, I was struck by how long we were in that mode, and I kept saying to myself,
they committed?
Yeah, I was like,
committed
what's the out going to be here? Are we just going to have a time jump or something like that? And then we end up getting that kind of Deus Ex Machina with Hell. But yeah, I'm glad that they stuck with it as long as they did. I guess one of the other big things that struck me, and especially because we've been looking at all of these different spins on the Supergirl legend, is that here, in terms of her origin, what we get in that initial arc, what we get in that 0 issue, what we'll later get when we get more of Zor-El's backstory, is that a lot of the traditional beats are there in terms of Zor-El being able to preserve Argo City under this dome, and it's floating out there in space. But a big departure here from what we had seen in pre-crisis territory and what we had gotten in her mid-aughts return to continuity is that here, Zor-El has his plan to create this dome using co-opted Brainiac technology over Argo City to preserve the city. But here in the New 52 iteration, he's not confident enough to risk his daughter's life. So against her wishes and against Alora's wishes, essentially knocks her out and puts her in this pod and sends her to orbit the sun, the Earth's yellow sun, because he knows she'll be strong, she'll be protected. And at a certain point, they can reunite once they've, I guess, sorted out Argo's situation, which unfortunately never comes to pass. But it's one of those things where it is a departure from what came before and what's come since, where here you don't have her living through Krypton's destruction, and you don't have her living through the radiation poisoning and ultimate destruction of Argo. So that was a different spin on it. How did that land for you?
Yeah, that was a little weird to me. I thought that she did. It was almost, I almost Mandela affected. Like, I thought that she did live on Argo and then was launched from Argo.
Well, she lived in Argo City on Krypton.
Yes, I thought she lived in domed, floating Argo. Yeah, that kind of seemed like it didn't seem like the best of both worlds. It felt like a little bit of a waste, that because I find Argo much more unique, and I love that it exists. I like that Zor-El is a brother who had a different plan. So I was a little disappointed that it was just another launch straight from the planet. But what was interesting to me this read through is how much you kind of hit on this a little bit of he drugged her. And I was almost like, that's almost a little too dour, a little too disturbing, because it's obviously a little bit of they're talking about a difference between doing a baby and a teenager is there's a consent issue going on. That was a little bit of an interesting take. And we could probably talk more about that when we get to the Cyborg Superman stuff.
Yeah, so there's that aspect to it. The other thing is, look, I know mileage varies on the trauma that Tom King mined from the origin story, but there is something powerful about her experiencing the demise of her homeworld multiple times on multiple levels. The initial destruction of the planet, then the radiation poisoning on the floating Argo City, and then the ultimate impending destruction of Argo. There's something to be said for that. You do short circuit that process if she's put into the rocket before the planet itself is destroyed. So yeah, I don't know if we're getting more with that. Arguably we're getting less. At the same time, consent issues aside, I guess from the fatherly perspective, the idea that he wouldn't want to risk her life as much as he thinks he's got a viable pathway for Argo City, the fact that it's like, no, that's not good enough for my child. I need to make sure that no matter what, she's okay. I'm going to put her in orbit around the sun and she'll be good no matter what. Something about that was compelling, but overall, yeah, I don't know that I would hold this specific spin on the origin. I wouldn't hold this up as kind of my ideal iteration.
No, I wouldn't either. But yeah, I do think there is a lot to mine, though, in Zor-El's headspace. If we're going to talk about Zor-El for a while, this is the Zor-El episode.
Yes.
Is because he saved her life. But there's a theme going on here about his ego and about he's not listening to anybody else. And I think you and me as dads can kind of see the trap of you can't force a kid to do something. And this whole arc is about him trying to force his daughter to make decisions instead of letting her make a decision for herself. And it's very interesting because I don't think that there's a clear, well, here's what he should have done.
Right.
But that's kind of, I don't know. I don't think I need a clear answer. I think that's good, food for thought.
Yeah. So the Zor-El piece here is interesting. I guess a big picture question for you is, prior to this, I suppose, I mean, how much thought space had you devoted to the character of Zor-El?
Oh, I love well, you mentioned New Krypton. I actually do think Allura and Zor-El are a big highlight of New Krypton.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a Silver Age guy. So I did like their you talked about it in the Silver Age episode. The episode or the issue where they find out her parents are alive and they kind of have a custody kind of battle between the adoptive parents and the biological parents. That's my favorite Supergirl issue.
Right on.
So I have quite a bit of affection for the L's. And I do also say a big surprise for me is post becoming a parent, I like the L's much more than I like the Kents. And that carried over to Zor-El and Allura too. So
interesting. Maybe a bit of a hot take, but interesting. Right on. Yeah, I mean, I guess historically I never paid much mind to Zor-El. I think, yes, the New Krypton saga shifted that a bit. And this whole idea, like what we're building towards here of Zor-El as an antagonist in the form of Cyborg Superman, I guess around this time, or the years leading up to this time, it was kind of in the air because we had the Supergirl series that launched after her return in Superman Batman. Jeff Loeb and Ian Churchill did the first arc, and then ultimately Sterling Gates would take over. But we had this interim period, and during that period, Joe Kelly did a run. And there was this idea they were playing with there that Zor-El had actually sent Kara to Earth to kill Kal-El. Now, when Sterling Gates took over, he kind of wiped that away with the explanation that Kara had been suffering from kryptonite poisoning, and that was messing with her memories. But there was that idea. And then, of course, the Smallville television show, which the audience has already heard our conversation about that, but that leaned into the idea of Zor-El as this antagonist, as this bad actor against Jor-El who had designs on Lara. There was that whole dynamic there. So I think like that kind of idea had been in the air, but this is a very specific track that we take here with this reimagining. And I guess even before we get to him reemerging as Cyborg Superman, I did like the dynamic that we see here in flashbacks between Jor-El and Zor-El, because it's not like they're at each other's throats or anything like that. And they are aligned in recognizing that Krypton's days are numbered, but they have different methods to try to save their people. And they each want the other's help, which was interesting, where Jor-El wants his brother's help in really developing this escape ship technology. Whereas Zor-El, on the other hand, is really keen on this dome idea, and each rejects the others. And I just thought that was an effective way to paint this, to kind of give them each their own lane without making them outright. Like, we're not in Jor-El and Zod territory here, so I feel like this was a cool way to kind of carve out something specific for Zor-El.
Yeah. And when it's like that, it feels more real to me too. Because I was also going to say, like, he's a very egotistical character, but it's a different kind of ego than Lex. It's a different kind of ego than Zod. And he's not a cackling villain. And you do get where he's coming from, because you could say that everything he's doing for his daughter, but he also has this ego that's preventing him from doing it the right way. Yeah, I will say I kind of had a little bit of a psychological breakthrough, because sometimes when I read, I'm like, well, that's not like me and my brother, because I love my brother. I have a big brother. He's the best. And then I had to think about it, and I was like, well, I never got taller than my brother. I never got stronger than my brother. I never got smarter than my brother. And I was like, oh, no. I have a inferiority complex because of him. And if we can jump ahead a little bit, the idea of when Brainiac takes Zor-El and he wanted Jor-El and he gives Zor-El his face, that just like getting the confirmation from a higher power that you're the lesser brother, I think really hit me this time around. You could say too, like the interesting thing about going back to what you were talking about is he could have been like, oh, Zor-El is making one rocket. I'm going to save a whole city,
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, that core idea of Zor-El being the lesser brother. And even Allura makes a remark at some point that essentially speaks to that idea. Very interesting. And yes, so what we ultimately find out is that as the people of Argo City were dying, there were just a few survivors left, and Zor-El in his desperation called out for help from Brainiac. And Brainiac arrives and decides to conduct this experiment with the lesser brother, but manipulates his DNA to look more like Jor-El and rebuilds him as this cyborg Superman. But he looks like the traditional Hank Henshaw cyborg Superman that we're accustomed to. So for Kara and the audience, that's the twist during basically at the midpoint of this New 52 series, these issues written by Michael Allen Nelson, when we find out that it's actually Zor-El. I mean, we'll unpack it even more specifically as far as the plot points and all of that, but I guess just the notion of changing the identity of Cyborg Superman and making him Zor-El. How do you feel about this?
Yes. I feel like the problem is the label. I really feel like, again, New 52 is all under a microscope and everyone's comparing everything to the old. I really believe that if they had not called him Cyborg Superman, that this would be a lot more praised, and I think it would have gone a long way. That after the twist is revealed, maybe like he went back to like blonde hair, maybe had a Zor-El color scheme. Yeah, but I remember at the time seeing it was Kenneth Rockford who designed the character, and he designed Zod and Lobo too, and it was an amazing design. If someone wants to tell me that Hank Henshaw is a better design and it's more iconic, I won't argue with you. But I did think that this Cyborg Superman felt less like the Terminator and more like something unique and different. So, yeah, I was really interested in this. I just wish that he was not called Cyborg Superman, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the top, I'm a bit mixed on this because the idea of revealing that Zor-El is alive, like we said, there's precedent for it, and obviously puts Kara in a tough spot in a number of ways. So I think that can be dramatically rich. So I'm not inherently opposed to Zor-El being alive or Zor-El being an antagonist. I guess where I have a little bit more of an issue is co-opting the Cyborg Superman name and look. Right. And I recognize my bias given my deep love for the death and return of Superman. So maybe that accounts for why I feel that way. But it's also one of those things. And boy, I really don't mean to keep complaining about My Adventures with Superman season 2. And I know, boy, people seem to really love it. And I'm so happy about that. But the fact that they're Brainiac is this swirl of Brainiac and Zor-El and Eradicator and Zod. It's just like, man, we have distinct characters, and I don't really like them smushed together like this. So to your point, yeah, maybe had the look been tweaked a little bit, and if he had not been outright called Cyborg Superman, I don't know, maybe that would have sat a little bit better. Actually, I thought came to me while you were talking about that. I don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if maybe you do. Do you know what the response was to this at the time, or what the view has kind of been among the fandom looking back? Because I don't know specifically. I'm wondering if you do.
I think it was pretty poor.
Okay.
It was a lot of what you're saying of like, we miss Hank Henshaw. I can't say like the reviews of the actual content, but people did not like the label, like to my point. And there was a story that I once heard that, and this is jumping ahead again. I know we're talking about New 52 right now, but when Rebirth happened and they were announcing all the things you love are coming back, during the panel that they announced Supergirl and that they announced the first arc is going to be Zor-El, Cyborg Superman, that they got booze.
Oh.
And it was like the first thing is like, no, that's not the thing that's returning. We want everything that's returning. And I think someone like yelled out, or like it might have been Dan DiDio. I don't remember who the story was, but they're like, oh yeah, like this is the first story with a bad dad. And it was just like, that's not people's problem with it, dude. It's the label. But yeah, I think if you're less hung up on the label, this is it.
Yeah. Now,
I would argue I think I like Zor-El better than Hank Henshaw. Those two separate characters. Who's a better Cyborg Superman is a different, again, don't get hung up on the name. But I think I think that I like this character, and I find it a deeper character than Hank Henshaw is.
I believe it or not, I get where you're coming from. Like, I do hear you. I mean, with Hank Henshaw, I feel like at this point now, it's more that just he's this recurring nemesis and you never know when he's going to show up. And it's like, oh, it's the Cyborg Superman. But yeah, in terms of his motivation, blaming Superman for the accident that transformed him and that cost him his wife, that gets you somewhere. But
I think he has motivation problem. I think he has a weak kind of, it's a tough thing when you want your thing to be revenge and you want to keep your hero sinless. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's a bit of a tough spot.
Yeah.
And I think with Hank Henshaw, it's a lot of, they can't explain his behavior. So it's kind of the 90s trope of like, oh, just say he's insane. Just say he's mentally ill.
I hear you. I mean, all that being said, though, I think the larger problem I have with the New 52 Zor-El Cyborg Superman, this changes with Rebirth, and I was actually pleased with this, but in the New 52, he's truly this reprogrammed puppet of Brainiac.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should mention he does not have his memories.
He doesn't have his memories, and Cyborg Superman and Supergirl cross paths on this world. I don't know how you would describe it. It's sort of this hive mind race that can shapeshift.
Made of a sort of high-tech clay.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. This high-tech clay that can reform and sort of recreate people, environments, structures. And so Supergirl thinks about and describes her home on Krypton in Argo City, and they're able to recreate this.
Uh-huh.
And Cyborg Superman claims, and I mean, this is true, that he doesn't remember who he is, but that perhaps by recreating Krypton from Supergirl's memories, this will jog his own memory. But the larger, more nefarious plot is that he wants to co-opt her flesh to reform his body that has been replaced with these cybernetics. Right?
Yep. Yeah, this again, it comes back to the consent issue. It's all the same theme going on here.
Yeah. And so ultimately, long story short, he is able to get the drop on Supergirl and complete this process where she is disintegrated and becomes part of the consciousness of this hive mind planet. And his physical form is restored. And this is where we get the reveal as he gets up from that table. And at first he's obscured in shadow. And then you see it's Zor-El and his memories come back. And he's horrified by what has happened because he didn't know who he was.
What have I done? That was my daughter. I just disintegrated and turned into clay.
Yeah. Now, to the story's credit, I mean, at least we get this. I mean, this went a long way for me to at least give him that moment of understanding, of horror, of regret. And he does ultimately have the process reversed. Supergirl is restored and he is reverted back to the Cyborg Superman who doesn't know who he is. But I don't know. I guess I didn't get that much out of a character. It's one thing when a character has awareness and turns and goes down a dark path. And I feel like that's more what we get in the Rebirth storyline. But here if it's someone who's simply been reprogrammed and controlled, I just feel like it's much more limited.
It would have been interesting to ask the writers if there was future plans that they did not get to do. That's the sense that I get. It does seem like this story was written knowing that the Rebirth story would happen, which can't be. But it seems like they had a story similar to that in mind when they were writing this. Because you're right, it would, if this was it would feel a bit of a waste that Supergirl didn't get to have a conversation with her dad.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. She leaves the New 52 not ever realizing that this was her father.
Which, and then in defense of that, you could also say that, you know, a evil dad stories have been done, and this was a different take on it. And sometimes you don't get to know things, and sometimes you don't get resolution. That being said, I think that the Rebirth story does improve this story.
And I think that's compounded here in the New 52. You were mentioning this earlier, the fact that you have Brainiac changing Zor-El's appearance to resemble Jor-El. Because when Supergirl first encounters Cyborg Superman, if memory serves, I think she first mistakes him for Cal or some version of him.
Yeah, and then within a panel, she's like, actually, maybe more like my uncle.
Right.
I actually really like that part. That stuck with me.
Yeah, and obviously ties into this theme that we're talking about of the lesser brother. Like they literally mold him into Jor-El. So I don't know. I can see the arguments on both sides, but yeah, overall, I only got so much out of the New 52 iteration. But if you're cool, can we jump to the Rebirth era, kind of following the Zor-El thread here?
Let's go on.
So I will just say, and maybe I've talked about this in the past, but I had a little experiment with myself as a comic book reader and buyer when the Rebirth era started, because going back to what I was talking about earlier in this episode, you know, at this point in my reading and buying journey, I wasn't reading monthly comics anymore and my comic shop had closed. But when they announced Rebirth, I thought, okay, like this might be an opportunity for me to get back into it. And one of our old customers had opened his own comic shop. So I went there, I started a pull list and I added a bunch of the Rebirth titles. And I had, maybe half a year. It was like that second half of 2016 where I was actually going to the comic shop again on a regular basis. And I was picking up a lot of the Rebirth titles, including Supergirl. And it's funny because I think it kind of put me off at the time. I'm much more okay with it now, but still the big picture takeaway remains the same, that you so clearly see the influence of the Melissa Benoist television series.
Yes.
On that Rebirth title. So it kicks off with this one-shot special, and then the first 6-issue arc is Reign of the Cyborg Superman, and that arc written by Steve Orlando, drawn by Brian Ching, and we have the return of Zor-El in that capacity. But as far as the influence of the show on the comic, you have Supergirl working with the DEO, and her handlers / foster parents are Jeremiah and Eliza Danvers. So a bit of a twist there in making both of them DEO agents, but still very much in the vein of the show. And we also have Cat Grant as the head of Catco Worldwide Media. In the comic, Supergirl is sent to high school. So she's a high school student, but she gets an internship essentially at Catco Worldwide Media. But between the set of Danvers' parents and Cat Grant, and the DEO affiliation, you very much feel the DNA of that show here. How did that sit with you, especially as someone who had fallen out of the show?
I got why it worked. I should have said part of the reason why I love the New 52 is if she didn't have a connection on Earth, I wouldn't miss it. And I know that might make some people mad, but so it's always an uphill battle for me when a character is at school. I'm not really like a high school drama type person. And I wish that she wasn't a reporter most of the time. That is when that was a big criticism of the show too, right? Is it felt like it can feel like Clark light, and it feels like putting square pegs in square holes and just going by the formula. But it's like, I get why it functions well, if that makes sense. But it's not the most interesting thing to me. No.
Dude, I hear you. And I've issued that complaint about the show before, and I'll say it again before this run of episodes is done. But what I actually liked here, so I guess I'm with you to a point. I do like sort of a human civilian side, but I don't like what we got in the television series where they were really plugging her into what could have been a Clark Kent Superman story.
Yeah.
And what was refreshing about the Rebirth series was that, I guess in large part because you were dealing with a younger iteration of the character than on the television series, you got to see her still acclimating to life. I mean, there's a moment, this is actually jumping back to the New 52 series, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it because it genuinely made me laugh when she's out to lunch with Silver Banshee's brother, and the server walks by with the pizza pie for another table, and she's just like, "Oh, I'll get us food," and she grabs the pizza. So nothing quite that extreme in the Rebirth series, but she is still struggling to fit in. And they do make a point at the beginning of the Rebirth series about how her pod only landed in Siberia a few months ago. So she's still very early on.
They make a point to say she's 16. Yeah. And they're not much time has passed. Yeah.
Yeah. To your point about the accent, that comes up. Also, one thing I noticed, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this is distinct to the Rebirth series. I don't think they did this in the New 52 series. I could be wrong, but I really flagged it in the Rebirth title where she doesn't use contractions when she speaks, which I feel like really amplifies kind of that separation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I think you're right.
So that kind of stood out. But, and that's the other thing with in comparing this to the television show. And I think it's a fair comparison to make. Because of how much the book was pulling from the show, where, you know, in the show, because we're picking up with her later and she's older, she's already acclimated. So I feel like you lose that whole dynamic of the character. And like I keep saying in all of these episodes, I think having a distinct avenue for Supergirl is critical. And I think the Rebirth book, as much as it drew from the show, created more space to show those differences as she was trying to figure her way.
I 100% agree with you. What didn't work for me about that is her parents. And I get that this can happen, but when you adopted a 16-year-old a couple months ago, I don't know if you're like, "Oh my God, we love each other so much." You know, it's a little bit of a hard sell that they're really connected.
She's calling them and referring to them as mom and dad like way sooner than I would expect. And I think I get where you're coming from on this, because there was something intriguing in that New 52 series where for a lot of it, and especially early on, really her only kind of human civilian touchstone was Siobhan.
There's no Danvers in the New 52, correct?
Only at the very, very end, because at the end of her series, she comes back from Crucible and all of that, and she notices her powers are on the fritz. And then her series is canceled. And then in the Final Days of Superman arc, or actually, I think even before that, we find out that her power loss was caused by Vandal Savage and that whole Savage Dawn business. And then in the Final Days of Superman, Superman finds Kara. She has given herself over to the DEO as they experiment on her and try to figure out what's wrong with her powers. And there is, Eliza is there, but they're not yet foster parents or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, but it does just seem weird that, so it makes sense that Eliza would say, "I'll watch this girl." They don't quite earn, "This is my daughter and I love her and I'd die for her." I don't think.
Fair. I think,
It's a tricky situation, but yeah, because I don't want to say that adopted kids you can't love them as much, but it's a bit late for that. It feels like. Yeah, no, I
didn't get the sense that that's what you meant. And I think maybe the larger issue that you're pointing to is just the relatively brief amount of time that's meant to have passed. I'll say for myself, I was surprised that they actually went as far as foster parents. Because like I said, I mean, I read a few of these issues a decade ago, and I haven't come back to them since. And in my head, my memory of it was, like the Danvers, they were there, but they were her handlers. I didn't remember that they went as far as them actually being her foster parents. Like it wasn't a cover. They were really caring for her. And I did appreciate, like, Jeremiah tries to learn the language and he's butchering all of the words. And I thought that was kind of comical.
Yeah. It's sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. And they redecorate their living room to try to mimic Krypton, but they're off by like a couple hundred years. She's like, oh, that look like that.
That was actually a great moment. That was like, Kara's like, oh, they're trying, but this is actually making me feel worse because they're wrong. And this is making me feel more lonely. That felt very real to me. I loved that moment.
Yeah. But then, as the title of this arc suggests, we get the return of Zor-El as Cyborg Superman. But now, in a very welcome change, he knows who he is. And I think the way they spin it, I have not read the Doomed event in full. I might have plans for it down the line. But I think the idea is that they did encounter each other during that Doomed event. And then that seems to have stuck with Zor-El, and I think ultimately allowed him to kind of break through and remember who he is. I think that was the gist of it. But either way, I haven't
reread it in a while.
But like he knows who he is here, and reveals his identity to Kara when one of his probes shows up on Earth to gather information from the Sunstone crystals. And while I still have the same reservations about co-opting another villain's look and identity, I felt a lot better about the Rebirth version because it's like, okay, this is the guy. He's gone off the deep end. He's got this plan he's concocted to resurrect Argo City. Like he's gone to the remains of Argo City, and I guess he's infused the deceased inhabitants of the city with cybernetics like his own. He uses data from the Sunstone crystals to sort of program them with memories and characteristics. But the upshot of all of this is that he needs life force to power them. And plans to use the people of Earth for that. And that's the plot.
We all have a little oadic. It was how'd you pronounce it? It's ODI, odic energy in our hearts.
Yeah.
That one was a little bit of a scientific stretch, but yeah, I think very good setup for a story and very kind of prescient. As it's not the first AI story, obviously, but when they go into Zor-El, not Jor-El, Zor-El he's taking dead bodies and kind of puppeteering them with machinery and uploading them with AI consciousness and kind of saying, good enough. These puppets now represent people. And I really liked that the story did not try to take the direction of, because I don't know about you, a lot of AI characters are kind of ruined for me now. When they start going like, wow, this is just as good as a soul. Wow, Red Tornado, you're more human than any of us, even though you're a robot. That's kind of spoiled for me now.
Okay.
I liked that this story is very much like, this is not a replacement for a mother. All of this data and it's her body, but it's not her. I really liked that angle, I guess.
Yeah, I did too. And Supergirl realizes that. And yeah, that's the crux of this conflict where from Zor-El's perspective, it's like, this is what you've wanted. You've wanted your home back. I've heard you longing for it. I've heard you not fitting in here. And this is your opportunity, and really puts her in this position of having to choose. And she chooses her adopted world. There's a great moment where he's taunting her. There's this idea of like, what do you think? Like you were sent here to inspire them. And as he's saying this, she's hearing all of the people around her on the street as they're helping each other and they're expressing concern for her and asking about her. And she throws it back at him and says, no, we're here to inspire each other. I thought that was a really cool moment. I like that a lot.
Yeah. That's a classic Superman stuff.
Yeah. And then ultimately, of course, she does prevail over Cyborg Superman. I mean, she throws him through the approaching Argo City. It seems like it might now crash into the city, but no, of course she accounted for that, and its flight path has it landing harmlessly in the ocean. And she had also sorted out earlier about essentially disrupting the frequency that's controlling all of these cybernetics. And they're able to get the city on board with broadcasting this counter signal. And that's how they're able to sort of shut all of this down.
Yeah. Well, I like too, this is a very scientifically minded Supergirl. And I think Steve Orlando's kind of take was instead of the difference being, every Supergirl writer, I think, kind of poses the question of like, why is she not just another Superman? And his kind of take was that she's more the scientist, I think. So it's a nice little like her figuring out through science and calculating her figuring out her problems. And I did want to say, going back to the artist Brian Ching, he is so good. And I did want to mention, like, this is the first Supergirl story that I felt like, oh, this looks like a unique voice and a unique style. And it went a long way to what we're talking about may sound a little basic because there is a lot of Kryptonian villains who thing is they're going to bring back Krypton. But there's so much personality in this book because of Brian Ching. I really wanted to give him a shout out, you know?
Yeah, right on. I mean, it's funny because I had read, as I was preparing for my reading project, I looked up reviews and whatnot, and I got the sense that, I don't know, maybe this was a little too young skewing, especially aesthetically for some folks, but I did not have that experience as I was reading it. I thought the art was really dynamic and refreshing. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
And I like too, I mean, I guess going back to this idea, like Zor-El is the lesser brother who's doomed by his own ego. It's like, you know, Supergirl makes the point of like, these people on Earth have done what you couldn't. They saved me. They protected me. Right? Like you failed Krypton and Argo multiple times now. So you see all that. Also, when the city is pitching in to broadcast that signal, you know, Cat Grant, she has her own role to play. And I love here, it all comes around because you had that Sterling Gates run and his use of Cat Grant there, a clear influence on the television series, and Cat Grant is played by Callista Flockhart there. And then now you have it come right back around to the comics.
Yeah.
So I just liked how that all came together. And Zor-El, though defeated, does survive and is kept in this DEO bunker at the end of this. And while I didn't read all of the Rebirth stories that followed, I know Steve Orlando ultimately had a 20-issue run on the book before it was briefly canceled and then resurrected with a different creative team during the Bendis era. But I did kind of skim ahead through some of the subsequent issues. But in issue 13 of the series, we get Mr. Oz, who shows up in this bunker and kills Zor-El.
Yeah. If we could go back a little bit, because I did read those issues, there's some really great moments too of Kara being like, I don't hate you.
Yep.
I'm not going to give up on you. She's going with the angle of, I want to redeem this person. And Steve Orlando was doing a really interesting thing of the public hating her for that.
Yes.
I just think that's the kind of a bigger discussion about Superman stories in general of like redeeming villains and how much this is a larger discussion, but like how much people say they like redeeming villains and how little that kind of reflects reality, I think. But the more relevant point to right now is that he doesn't get redeemed and he does kill somebody. And so you have this idea of send Supergirl's character to believe she can save him, but now she never gets to know. That was a really, I don't know, that kind of hit me on this time around. Yeah.
Right on. Like I said, I didn't read through all the rest of Orlando's run. Do we get a moment of her learning about Zor-El's death? And like, what sort of reaction does she have? Do you recall?
Ooh, that's a good question. Honestly, I think what happened is they quickly swept Zor-El under the rug because Oz was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think my honest opinion is at some point somebody realized that they wanted to bring Zor-El back and have him be evil. And they realized almost too late, oh, we just did this with Zor-El. And then so they were like, oh, we got to get rid of him quick.
Yes. So that ties into something I was going to ask you, or you beat me to it. Cause yeah, it's like, look, I don't know. I don't know exactly what was going on behind the scenes with all the Mr. Oz business, but reading it, like I've always gotten the sense, I truly don't think that was their plan from the outset with him.
No way. If you reread the Jeff Johns Superman run recently, his first page, in retrospect, he's very obviously Jonathan Kent.
Okay.
And he calls him Clark. He says something like, "Pick yourself back up. I taught you that, Clark." And someone pointed out this to me is the reason his name is Oz is because he's far from Kansas.
Okay.
But yeah, at some point they ditched that and made him Jor-El, and I think they made. Well, yeah.
Yes.
I think Zor-El suffered from it. Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for that. I continue to cite this Mark Waid New History of the DC Universe and that line there about Mr. Oz purporting to be Jor-El. So in my book, he claimed he was Jor-El, and I'll leave it at that. But I do wonder. I'm curious if it played out the way you're speculating, right? Where they decided to pivot with Jor-El and Mr. Oz and realize like, oh, we've also got this Zor-El business. Like we got to clean this up. Or, I mean, I wonder if the evil Zor-El stories in any way kind of change their thinking and they're like, oh, we could actually do this with Jor-El. Like, I mean, I don't know, but I wonder.
I think that they just, they weren't thinking about Supergirl stories at all when they were planning out Superman. That's my feeling.
Perhaps. Yeah. I mean, I'd be curious to know. I will say, while the Jor-El as Mr. Oz business never sat right with me, and I do feel like there are certain aspects of the Superman origin story that are sacred and should not be touched. And that's why we have things like Elseworlds, and we have this Father of Tomorrow miniseries that's going on. Like, that's great. We can explore different takes on that in those venues. But mainline, I really don't like if we touch Jor-El and Lara, bring them back, make them evil, what have you. But I think like this is an opportunity. I for me personally, I don't feel as strongly with Zor-El and Allura, and I feel like, okay, maybe like we have a little bit more room to maneuver with them.
Yeah.
So that's why, like I keep saying,
definitely
Zor-El coming back, Zor-El being evil, I'm open to that. Like I said, the bigger objection I had was his lack of agency and was, him taking over another character's identity. But the core idea, and I think it really created a genuine conflict for Supergirl. So there was a lot of interesting material going on here. Yeah. What have we not talked about that we must talk about?
I think we have to talk about the new 52 costume.
It's so wait, yeah, I agree, but it's so funny. I've been talking about this poor girl's costume in all of these episodes, and this was one instance where I was like, all right, maybe I'll leave it alone this time. But no, we do have to talk about it. Go for it.
It's a little insane. Here's actually, I like the cape. I actually love her hair. I like that she has a unique hairstyle and that she doesn't look like any other blonde comic book character. So the insane thing is that she has the red diamond, it looks like a sticker over her crotch.
Yes.
And it looks insane because she has her shirt that obviously ends above her hips. And then again, just a patch. It's a real shame because there are actually some beautiful pages in that book with beautiful scenery of her in the sky and everything. And it's so distracting. And there's a lot of elegant stuff about the suit that I like. And then there's just this really bizarre choice.
No, I agree. I had the same reaction to it. I'm looking at it. There's so like the top half, great. And it does look and feel more alien, and it's not, obviously the new 52 Superman had that more armor-like suit, but it didn't come off as just a female version of that. Like it felt like its own thing. But yeah,
again, her cape looks great. It looks more, because you're right, Superman had armor, but they're only going to let Superman look so Kryptonian. She looks very Kryptonian and kind of matches with the new 52 Krypton aesthetic, which is great, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's a real shame. So Jim Lee did this design, and I like Jim Lee, but I think it's not an uncommon opinion that he's got a weakness in character design. And it's a real shame because if you look at the back, I don't know if you read like a a trade or a volume of the New 52.
Yes, with the different with the alternate designs. Yeah.
I wish they let the artist of the book make the final decision.
Well, yeah, this just came up very recently when we covered the Sophie Campbell series, and my guest there made the same point about how, while he doesn't have specific objections to the current costume in the comics, he would have preferred for Sophie Campbell to have been able to design it as opposed to have to use Art Germ's. Yeah, that was Art Germ's design.
Wow.
Yeah, so a similar thing here. Yeah,
it wasn't her decision to have a midriff.
No. So I mean, and I don't know what if she would have landed on something very similar or different, I don't know, but a similar sort of thing here. Yeah, I mean, generally, I've been talking about this. Like, I like the skirt. I like it to be red. I like the contrast between the blue and the red. I don't really love the pre-crisis blue top, blue skirt, but I can live with it. And when we look at the television series in particular, in those final couple of seasons, she switched to the pants, and it's fine. It's generally not my preferred look, but here in the New 52, I feel like this costume was screaming for pants. I feel like I don't know that a skirt or even
I don't even think she has to be completely. I'm not someone who thinks that female characters have to be head to toe covered.
Sure.
But this one's insane.
Yeah, it's no.
I think if it was a leotard, if it was shorts, because I do think there's something to it looking at superheroes being in like athletic wear. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's something that needs to be done here. It could have been a great costume. I hope they bring the cape back.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've not advocated for pants in any of these other discussions, but this is just one instance where I feel like pants would have been appropriate.
Yeah,
so anything would have been better than what we got here. It just it didn't strike the right note, in my opinion. But but yeah, otherwise, I mean, I think very striking visual. Yeah, man, this was a lot of fun. Anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to?
I'll just shout out the one New 50. If I'm just defending the New 52 in general. The page where she's sitting on a cloud, kind of all-star like, kind of a reverse all-star, because she's sitting the opposite way and it's at night. And she's just thinking like, what if I do just fly up in space? I think that's the best Supergirl page.
Right on. Yeah. I mean, look, like I said, I really wasn't planning to do anything with these specific eras. Because I just felt like we had so much to cover already. But I'm really glad that we carved out the time to do this. And I'm glad that I delved in as deeply as I did. I mean, like I said, I read virtually that entire New 52 series, and at least the beginning of the Rebirth title. I don't know if or when I'll complete that specific reading project, but I'm glad that now at least I have the experience with both of these eras. And coming back to where we started about these themes, these patterns that emerge looking at the character, I think one of the other big things, aside from Zor-El coming back time after time, is that the character has been spun in all of these different ways. I think even more so than our icons of the DC universe. And these two eras are yet another instance of that, where we really lean into the stranger in a strange land mode in the New 52, and then we really adhere to the model of the television show with some deviations in the Rebirth era. And each one really does feel distinct to each other and to what's come before and after. So I'm glad that we kind of filled in this part of the story and this piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I'm glad you did too. I would say, to people who kind of disparage this era, give it another shot, because I did, and I'm happy I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the New 52 series in particular, that first year, those first couple of arcs and that last arc, and if you're intrigued by what we've said about the Zor-El, Cyborg Superman, that middle arc, but yeah, I mean, like, there's good stuff there, and you can, while those New 52 stories, I think, like we said, do ultimately hold together, it is also modular enough. You could just read that final Crucible arc on its own. Like, if you're really intrigued by the idea of like, oh, Supergirl at the school with other powered beings, you can just jump into that, or you can stop after that initial year. I wouldn't do
that one, but yeah.
Fair enough. Well, it's funny that too. It's not like, would I want that as my default status quo always? No, but in and of itself, in that vacuum, I thought, oh, okay, like this was a cool attempt to do something different with the book than what we had seen. Adam, thank you so much. Your third appearance. Well done.
Three-timers club. Hooray.
There you go. Thank you so much. Thank you, audience. I always appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you keep coming back as a Supergirl fan journey continues. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Rewards include our DCU spinoff podcast, advanced listens, sponsorship opportunities, and more. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please rate and review the podcast via your platform of choice, subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Lighting the Bat Signal, a Batman fan journey, which applies the signature Digging for Kryptonite approach to the Dark Knight, as well as another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now in its final year covering the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.